Okay, hi, so welcome to this video where we're going to be going through the entire of Biology Unit 3. This is the AQA Higher paper from May 2014. So this is the B3 paper, May 2014, and we are going to be doing the entire paper. So as usual, please feel free to pause, rewind the video and go at your own pace if I'm going too quickly, but we're going to jump straight in with question 1. Alright, so question 1 says the number of fish in the oceans is decreasing. Alright, table 1 shows information about the mass of fish caught by UK fishermen between 2002 and 2010. Right, so here's the table. You can read that yourself, but I'm going to straight away look at question 1A, part 1, and it says calculate the percentage of fish caught from sustainable sources in 2010. Right, so we're looking at this row here because it's 2010. Right. First column is mass of fish caught by UK from all sources, right? The second column is sustainable sources, and then the third column is percentage caught, right? And obviously we've got this gap here and we've got to work it out. Well, to find out a percentage of anything, it's a fraction. So it is the amount by sustainable divided by the total amount caught by all sources. So that is going to be 465.0 divided by 611.5, because it's sustainable divided by all of it times by 100, and that is going to give us a percentage. Alright, you do that in your calculator and you're going to get an answer of 76.04251, so on. And so I'm going to write that as 76.0%, right, because that's the three significant figures, so 76.0 is fine. So that's 2 marks for the first question. So let's now move on. Here we go. So for part 2, it says describe the pattern in table 1 for the mass of fish caught from all sources. Okay. Now it says from all sources here, and it says suggest the reasons for this pattern. All right. So the thing we have to look out for here is that it said the mass of fish caught from all sources, not from all sources and from sustainable sources, right? So the only pattern we want to describe is this pattern here, right? Let's just get rid of that underline there. We want to describe the pattern here. So let's have a look. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is that you can clearly see that the mass of fish being caught goes down from here. So 690, 655, 619, 589, right? It's going down, 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 down. And then it goes up again from 2008 to 2010, right? So the first pattern I'm going to say is that there is a decline of the mass of fish caught between 2002 and 2008. All right, so I'm going to say decline in fish caught. Right, I'll put mass there in brackets. Right, decline in the fish caught between 2002 and 2008. All right, that's good for 1 mark. Now, we're asked to suggest reasons for the pattern. So the reason for this pattern could be that due to overfishing, right, due to the fact that we fish loads, it means that there are less and less fish in the sea. And if there's less fish to catch, then the mass of fish is going to be reduced. So I'm going to say perhaps due to overfishing leading to less fish in the sea to catch. Alright, now that's the first part. The second part, if we take a quick look, was that between 2008 and 2010, we catch more fish again, right? So the total mass of fish goes up. So I'm going to say between 2008 and 2010, the mass of fish caught, well, there we go, fish caught increases. Alright, that's the third mark. So now we just need to come up with an example of why that might be the case. Well, why might it go up? Well, you'll know that in the last 10 years, especially, it has been a policy to try and look after the environment more. And so there have been restrictions brought into play which limit the amount of fishing that you can do in a particular area, because we know that this is causing fish to become extinct, or at least their populations to go down, right? So these policies maybe have started to work. So we might maybe start to seeing more fish in the sea because we are not fishing as aggressively as we used to be. So I'm going to say that policies on overfishing may be working, leading to more fish in the sea, so we can catch, let's write that out, catch more fish. Now you might be thinking, well, that sounds strange, so we've limited the amount of fishing, but therefore we've caught more fish. Yep, well, we are not just limiting the total amount of fish, right, that you can possibly catch. We're limiting the amount of fish that you can catch in a specific area, because if you overfish certain areas, then the population of fish in that area will go down. And so if you even it out, if you even it out, and make sure that you're not overfishing in one area, it means that the populations can start to increase. And this means that as we are fishing, obviously, all over the UK, this table is for the UK, that means that the populations of fish are going up, which means that we actually can catch more fish, but in a more sustainable way. All right, and that is why it might seem a bit weird to start off with, but that explains that trend. All right. It says in part 3, suggest why the percentage of fish caught from sustainable sources is increasing, right? Now, there are a few reasons for this. One could literally be what I just said, which is that there are now policies on sourcing fish in sustainable ways. And so I can just say policies introduced enforcing sustainable, sorry about this handwriting, fishing. All right, and that's good for 1 mark. We could have also said that, for example, public awareness has gone up because now when you go to the supermarket, you're always seeing organic produce, right? And this was produced in a sustainable way. And now if you don't see those sorts of labels, you might think, well, clearly something's not right here. We're not looking after the environment. And so people are actually buying the organic produce and the sustainable produce more. So there's a higher demand for it as well. All right, so there are a few ways of answering that question. All right, now in 1B it says give 2 methods of maintaining fish stocks at a sustainable level. All right, and now the first one is again what we've been saying. So basically policies, giving an upper limit or a ban, if you like, on fishing too much. So we're going to say bans on overfishing. All right, that's 1 mark. Now another one is to do with the size of the nets that we are using to fish, because if we use huge nets which have really small mesh, then it means that we are going to catch almost all the fish in one area, and it means that the population is going to really be affected. So what we're going to do is we use either small nets where we're not going to catch everything, or we use large mesh, which means that some fish will be caught but some fish can slip through, and therefore you've still got fish in the area. So I'll say that smaller net sizes. All right, but you could have said larger mesh sizes. Okay, next. 1C, it shows a fish farm. It says, in a fish farm, large numbers of fish are grown in cages in the sea. Why do fish in the cages grow faster than fish of the same species that are free in the sea? And you should refer to energy in your answer. All right, so when it says we should refer to energy, that's because for anything to grow, it requires energy, all right? Now, the way that we get energy is by eating, and the way that we lose energy is by movement or doing other things, okay? Movement is the main one, though, if we're talking about a farm. So there are 2 points to this question, all right? So we're going to say each point and explain, because it says why do they, don't just describe what's happening. So the first point is I'm going to say that the fish, bearing in mind they're in cages, cannot move as much as wild fish in the sea, right, as they are inside cages, right? Because they can't move enough, not enough, they can't move as much as the fish in the sea, it means that they're not burning as much energy, which means more energy is going towards growth. Okay, so the explanation there will be that less energy is lost in movement and so can be used for growth. Right? Okay, on the flip side, if we are keeping animals in a cage and we want them to grow as fast as we can literally make sure that they are on the correct diet to grow as quickly as possible. And they are always supplied with food, whereas in the wild, sometimes, there might be a shortage of food. And so you're going to struggle to grow if you can't find any food. So we're going to say that fish are constantly fed the proper food to encourage growth. Okay. In wild, fish may go without food. All right. And so the explanation there, I'm going to say that more energy, I'll put in this in brackets, from food available for growth. And so fish grow quicker. All right, and then that's the end of that question. That's easily 4 marks. And that's the end of question 1. All right, so let's have a look at question 2. Now it tells us that we're going to be assessed on our English, so you need to make sure that you are writing in full sentences. I will probably write in bullet points, just so you can get the idea. Okay, so it says deforestation affects the environment. Deforestation is causing a change in the amounts of different gases in the atmosphere. This change causes global warming and climate change. Now, figure 2 shows an area of deforestation, and you can just see a load of trees have been chopped down. All right, so it says give reasons why deforestation is taking place and describe how deforestation is causing the change in the amounts of different gases in the atmosphere. All right, so this is a 6-mark question. There are actually loads and loads of marks that you can get for this question, right? Because it's very broad. There are loads of reasons why deforestation is happening. So, first of all, let me just switch to another color. We're going to use green for reasons why deforestation is happening, and then how it's causing deforestation is going to be in red. All right, so first of all, a reason why deforestation is happening is that wood is used in timber production. All right, that includes loads of things. So it includes things like furniture. It includes anything really which is made of wood. Furniture is a big one. Things like laminate flooring, wooden flooring, even going to things like boats, right? Anything that's made of wood, timber is going to be used, and you get that from trees. All right. Also going to be used to produce paper. All right, that's almost the same thing because you're making something out of wood, but it's slightly different because paper and wood don't really look the same, so I'm going to mention it as a separate point. Okay, next. What else do we chop down trees for? Well, sometimes we chop down trees in order to make space for other things, right? So trees are cleared to make room for, and now what are they going to be making room for? Well, they could either be making room for housing or industrial uses, okay? Housing or industry. Okay, they could also be making room for agriculture of, and I'm going to say either plants or livestock. Right, so we don't eat trees, right? That's no surprise. We don't eat trees, but we do eat things like rice. We do eat things like corn. And if we need to grow more food, because of course the world's population is always rising, and so more food is always needed, then we need to clear clear some space in order to grow that food, and so deforestation happens for that. Another one there is obviously things like cattle, so livestock. All right, now they need a large area and they need crops to graze on, and so if you clear the forest, you can therefore make room to grow the plants and to have animals feed on them. Alright, now there are a few others. Obviously those plants could also be used for biofuels, right? That's something completely different. But you're still basically clearing the trees to make room for those things. Alright, so you get the idea. That's more than enough in terms of the reasons why deforestation is taking place. Now in red, I'm going to say how it's contributing to climate change. Alright, so burning fuels, for example, tree wood, or other biofuels which are grown there as a result. Fuels releases CO2, which is a greenhouse gas. All right. Okay, why else would there be more CO2 in the atmosphere? Well, trees carry out photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis, because they are plants themselves, they are giant plants, they carry out photosynthesis, and if those trees are gone, then those trees can't carry out the photosynthesis anymore, and that means they're not taking in CO2. Trees carry out photosynthesis, so when cut down, they cannot take in CO2, which leads to higher CO2 levels. Alright, so there are loads of different answers as to why CO2 is being, or why CO2 is increasing, sorry. You know, we could also say that microorganisms which are feeding on the leftovers of the trees are respiring and releasing loads of CO2 from the trees themselves as well, and that obviously contributes to carbon dioxide levels rising. Right, but what I'm going to say for my third point, which is something which is slightly different, I don't want to talk about CO2 only, is methane. All right, now livestock, particularly cows, right? Livestock which are raised in deforested areas release methane, okay, into the air when they digest their food, okay, which increases levels of methane. All right. So those are really the main answers, okay? You're talking about CO2, you're talking about methane. Now, they wouldn't actually give you any answers in relation to oxygen. The reason being because there's so much oxygen in the air anyway that this isn't really affecting the level of oxygen too much. Alright, so there were clearly more points there that we could have made, but this is more than enough for our 6 marks, right? We've described and explained different ways or different reasons for deforestation taking place, and different ways in which this is affecting the level of gases in the atmosphere, particularly carbon dioxide and methane. All right, now that is the end of question 2. All right, so question 3. We are told that plant roots absorb water from the soil by osmosis. All right, we know that's true. First question for 3 marks is, what is osmosis? Now, you should know that osmosis is basically diffusion of water, but it has to be across a semi-permeable or partially permeable membrane. Those two are the same thing. All right, so what I'm going to say is that osmosis is the passive. Right, now remember, passive means requiring no energy. So we don't have to put any energy in for osmosis to happen. It's a spontaneous process. Okay, it's the passive movement of water, has to be water, across a partially permeable membrane down a concentration gradient of water. Right, now that pretty much is 3 marks. That's 3 marks in one sentence, because what I've said is that it's the passive, right, requiring no energy, movement of water across a partially permeable membrane, down a concentration gradient of water. Now, because a lot of the time you learn a definition in a different way, rather than stating the concentration of water, I'm going to put in brackets here, also that's the same as from dilute solution to concentrated solution, because what we're talking about in that case is a dilute solution has a high concentration of water and therefore everything else is dilute. A concentrated solution has a low concentration of water, so everything inside it is more concentrated. So you are moving from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water, but sometimes you talk about it in terms of the concentration of something else like sugar or salt or something like that. Alright, now that is more than enough for 3 marks. So in 3b, we are told that figure 3 shows parts of a plant root. This plant root is adapted for absorbing water from the soil. Use information from figure 3 to explain how this plant root is adapted for absorbing the water. Alright, now this is really simple. What you can see here, the main part are these hairs, right? So these are the hairs, or the root hairs. Alright, and they are really thin and really long, and they have a extremely high surface area compared to their volume. So what I'm going to say is that many hairs on the root have a very high surface area to volume, not ration, ratio. Alright? This means the total surface area of the root is greatly increased, leading to an increased rate of osmosis. Right? You could also talk about diffusion there, because it would be the same if we were talking about anything apart from water. But the fact you've got a very high surface area, which means that you've got a short path for the water to go to get into the root, means that we have a high rate of osmosis, and that is more than enough for 3 marks. And that is the end of question 3. Alright, so question 4 says that blood is part of the circulatory system. Yep, we know that's true. Now in part A, or A part 1, it says give one function of white blood cells. Now white blood cells are basically involved in the immune response, right? Now if you'd have said that, you would even actually get the 1 mark, but we want to be slightly more specific just to be safe. Now what do they actually do? Well, they destroy pathogens is the main one. Okay, so I'm going to say they destroy. Right, there we go, let's just neaten that up. Destroy pathogens. Alright, that's enough for 1 mark. We could have said they engulf pathogens, right? They can carry out phagocytosis. We could have said they produce antibodies. We could have said they produce antitoxins. Alright, all of those would have got you a mark, because there are a lot of things that white blood cells would do. Alright, now part 2. Oh, can't see that. There we go. It says, which of the following is a feature of platelets? Now, they don't have a nucleus. Right, they are actually small parts of cells, right? They're not full cells themselves, so they don't have a full nucleus. They don't contain hemoglobin, because that is the red blood cells, right? So the correct answer is that they are small fragments of cells. Alright, in question B, it says, urea is transported by the blood plasma from where it is made to where the urea is excreted. Complete the following sentence. Alright, so blood plasma carries urea from where it is made. Now, urea is made as a result of deamination in the liver. Alright, it says, to the something where the urea is removed from the blood. Now, where the urea is going to be removed from the blood is the kidney. Alright, so the kidney. Okay, because then obviously we're going to use the urea to form urine. Alright, and so it says continue to the next page, and we have a picture of the heart. So it says structure X is a valve. If X stops working, it may need to be replaced. A scientist is designing a new heart valve. The scientist knows that the valve must be the correct size to fit the heart. Right, it says suggest 2 other factors the scientist needs to consider so that the newly designed valve works effectively in the heart. Now, even though this might seem like quite a hard question, there are actually loads of things that you'd have to consider, right? It's not just about how big the valve is. Obviously, that's what we've already been told because it needs to fit. But what else is important for a valve? Well, if the valve allowed blood to go back through it, then it's not a very good valve and it leaks. So we need to make sure. One thing would be that the valve doesn't leak. So valve, or the valve, doesn't leak or allow any backflow, right? Because that kills the point of the valve. The whole point of the valve is to stop backflow. All right, what else? Well, there are loads of others. One main one, and this goes for anything that you are going to transplant into a body, is that your body accepts it. Now, your body, when it senses something foreign, it can elicit something called an immune response, right? And that's where your immune system starts to break down the thing that's been inserted. And that's why transplants sometimes can go wrong, all right? So we need to make sure it does not cause an autoimmune response. And I'm going to put, oh, that's awful writing. Let me just write that under here. Response. Now I'm going to put in brackets, valve is accepted by the body. All right. Now there are loads of other ones you could have. Well, the valve, obviously you want it to last a long time. If it was made out of something which will dissolve or break down after, about 3 weeks, then it's obviously not really going to be very good because you're going to have to do the operation again all the time. So you need a long-lasting substance. You need something that's going to be strong and withstand any sort of high pressure and so on and so on. So there were loads of different answers there, but you only need 2. All right. So question 5. 5 says the leaves of most plants have stomata. Right, we know that's true. Name the cells which control the size of these stomata. Now that is the guard cells. Guard cells. Next it says give one function of the stomata. Now the stomata really have 2 functions. They want to allow carbon dioxide to enter because plants need carbon dioxide in order to carry out photosynthesis, and when they produce oxygen they want that oxygen to leave. So either one of those is going to be fine, and it only says 1, so we need to make sure we only mention 1. So I'm going to say allow oxygen, awful writing there, oxygen to leave after photosynthesis. All right, you could have said CO2 to come in for photosynthesis, and that would have been equally as fine. Right, so 5b, we've got figure 5, which shows part of the surface of a leaf. Now it says the length and width of this piece of leaf surface are both 0.1 millimeters, right? Calculate the number of stomata per millimeter squared of this leaf surface. Now, the common mistake that everyone will make is they will just times this by 10. So let's have a look. How many stomata do we have here? We have 1 and we have 2. So we have 2 stomata. All right. And in how much area of leaf? Well, it's 0.1 times 0.1, which gives me 0.01 millimeters squared. All right. So 0.01 millimeters squared. But we want per 1 millimeter squared, all right? So what I need to do is well, how do I get 1 from 0.01? I times by 100. So I need to times the amount of stomata by 100. So it's going to be 2 times 100 will give me 200 stomata. And that is going to be my answer. It's going to be 200 per millimeter squared. Right, so I'm going to put down here 200 per millimeter squared. All right, so let's move on. Next, we have B part 2. a different plant species has 400 stomata per millimetre squared, having a large number of stomata per millimetre squared of the leaf can be a disadvantage to the plant. Suggest or give one disadvantage. Now, on the previous page, we're not going to mention the oxygen or carbon dioxide because both those things are advantages, right? But the disadvantage, if you allow air to go in and air to come out constantly, is that also we get transpiration. Now, transpiration or evapotranspiration, right, they're the same thing, means that water is evaporated out of the plant. And if you have more openings, it means more water can be lost. So I'm going to say more water can be lost from the plant. All right, and that's fine for 1 mark. Now we've got 5C. It says a student investigated the loss of water from plant leaves, right? If you would have carried on reading the question, you would have been able to get the answer to the last question, right? Because now they're investigating that loss of water. The student did the following. Step 1, took 10 leaves from a plant. 2, weighed all 10 leaves. 3, hung the leaves up in a classroom for 4 days. 4, weighed them all again. 5, calculated the mass of water lost by the leaves. 6, repeated those steps with grease spread on the upper surfaces. And step 7, repeated again with grease spread on both the upper and lower surfaces. All right. All the leaves were taken from the same type of plant. Now, it says here we have the mass of water lost in grams, and we have 0.98 for no grease, 0.86 for grease on upper surface, and 0.01, right, for grease on the upper and lower surfaces. All right, let's have a look at the questions. What mass of water was lost in 4 days through the upper surface of the leaves? Now we just go back and we have a look at when there was no grease used on the leaves and when grease was used only on the upper surface of the leaves, because the only difference there is the upper surface, right? We're actually going to ignore this bottom one. So when no grease was used, we lost 0.98 grams, all right? But when grease was used on the upper surface, we lost 0.86. And so the difference between those must be the amount of water that was lost through the upper surface of the leaves. Because when we cover it up and we don't lose water from the upper surface, then that means that the water loss was from the lower surface. So here we're going to have 0.98 grams minus 0.86 grams, which will give me 0.12 grams. 0.12. Now that was slightly more tricky than it first looks. It first looks like you just have to read off the chart, but no, you actually have to do this calculation. Alright, so part 2 then says that very little water was lost from the lower surfaces when the leaves were covered in grease. Right? Explain why. Well, the lower surface is where the stomata are, right? So that's what I'm going to write first. The lower surface has stomata on the bottom of the leaves. All right. Now the stomata are covered in grease in this case, which blocks them up, All right, now if they're blocked with grease, that means that they can't allow gas in and out, but more importantly, it means that water can't go in and out, so we're not going to be losing water out of the stomata. So therefore, water is not lost from leaves by transpiration. All right, and that's a result of the stomata being blocked. All right, and that's more than enough for those 3 marks. And so we will move on. All right, so let's take a look at question 6. So it says in figure 6, it shows the core body temperature and the skin surface temperature of a cyclist before, during, and after a race. Right, so we've got 2 lines here. We've got the core body temperature in the solid line and the skin surface temperature in the dotted line. So for A part 1, we are asked, let's move back up so we can see the whole graph. We are asked, when the cyclist finished the race, his core body temperature started to decrease. So how long did the race last? So let's have a look at when the core body temperature starts to decrease, and that will be this point here. All right, and that corresponds to 10:30, right? So that's the time of day, so that's 10:30 a.m. Right, now, when did the race start? Well, we've got an arrow here pointing at 9:15, and so all we need to do is, well, what's the difference between 10:30 and 9:15? Well, that is 1 hour and 15 minutes, right? And that is the length of the race, and that is fine for the first part. So next, we asked to describe and explain the different patterns shown in core body temperature and skin surface temperature between 9:15 and 10:15. Now, the reason they said 10:15 and not 10:30 is because at 10:30 it starts to go down again. All right, so 10:15, all we're doing is we're describing and explaining the trends before this guy finishes the race. All right, now this is a 6-mark question because we have to describe and explain 2 things. So, first thing I'm going to say is that the pattern in body temperature is that it goes up. So we get increase in core body temperature. All right, now why does this happen? Well, as you're carrying out exercise, well, you need to start respiring more because you're doing more work, you're using more energy, respiration rates will increase. So this is due to an increase in the rate of respiration. Okay, now what happens during respiration? Well, in respiration, energy is released and some is heat energy, right? And heat energy will increase your core body temperature. So I'm going to just put there to make sure. Raising body temperature. Okay. Now let's go back up and have a look at the trend in skin surface temperature. Well, skin surface temperature from here to 10:15, which is here. Skin surface temperature decreases. All right, so that's the first thing I'm going to say. Let's do it on the next page and make use of the space. So skin surface temperature decreases. Now, why does that happen? Well, as the internal body temperature goes up, basically our body reacts to try and reduce it. And the way it does that is we sweat, right? This is a result of sweating in response to increased internal temperature. Okay, now what happens then is that evaporation of the sweat removes energy from the skin and so it reduces the temperature, right? So evaporation of the sweat removes the water, I put in brackets here, and energy, so that's heat energy, from skin, reducing temperature. Alright, so the temperature goes down because that thermal energy has been removed in the form of sweat as the sweat evaporates. Alright, now that's definitely more than enough for 6 marks. So let's move on. And in A part 2, it says, A part 3, it says, after 10:30, the core body temperature decreased. Explain how changes in the blood vessels supplying the skin caused the skin's surface temperature to increase. Now let's take a quick look at the graph just so we know what we're talking about. And that is here. Look, so the skin surface temperature starts to increase, right? Because the body temperature has started to decrease. All right, what's actually happening there is that we want to cool down the inside of the body. The way our body does that, apart from sweating, is to dilate the blood vessels, all right? So that is known as vasodilation. So vasodilation, right, and I'm going to put blood vessels. So near surface of the skin, and that is, sorry about that full stop, that's in order to reduce internal temperature. Okay, now blood close to the skin increases the surface temperature of the skin, and that's why the skin temperature goes up and the internal body temperature starts to go down. Alright, now 6b says that during the race the cyclist's blood glucose concentration began to decrease. Describe how the body responds when the blood glucose concentration begins to decrease. Now, in being specific, the way that our body responds is, first we need to figure out that the concentration is low. So low glucose, oh, that's awful, there we go, glucose concentration is detected by, and remember the main organ involved in glucose levels, blood glucose, is the pancreas. Alright, by the pancreas. Okay, pancreas then produces an enzyme, a hormone called glucagon. Alright, now I always remember this because glucagon turns glycogen into glucose, right? Just because the names are all similar, it made it easy for me to remember, right? So glucagon turns glycogen into glucose, so that's obviously when your blood sugar is low. Insulin is the one you need to remember when blood sugar is high, alright? So it turns that into glucose, right? And that's what we're going to say. So glycogen is then broken down into glucose, increasing blood glucose level. Alright, and that's more than enough for 3 marks, because you have to remember, or you have to mention, that the low blood glucose is detected by the pancreas. Pancreas then produces glucagon. Glucagon then causes glycogen to be converted into glucose, right? And that will increase your level of blood glucose. Alright, so let's have a look at question 7. Figure 7 shows a model biogas generator. Right, let's scroll down so we can see it a bit better. Now, here we've got figure 7. We've got a plastic bottle with food waste and water inside it. That's what's filling it up. All right, then we've got a cap and a cork to stop anything from getting out, apart from going through this tube here, right? So this tube clearly here is filling up a balloon, and you've got a valve this way, which allows a Bunsen burner to be burnt using that gas. All right, so let's have a read. It says that students used the model biogas generator to investigate which type of food waste produces the greatest yield of biogas. Gas collects in the balloon. The gas is then released through the valve and is burned at the Bunsen burner. Right, that's what we said. Now the students put 500 grams of potato peelings in the plastic bottle with some water and sealed the apparatus. They released the gas from the balloon after day 2 and timed how long the gas burned for. They then released the gas that had collected from the balloon from day 2 to day 4 and timed how long that gas burned for. They repeated the investigation using 500 grams of cooked rice, 500 of cabbage leaves and 500 of cooked pasta. Alright, so here is the table with their results, and you've got the length of time that gas burns for given the different fuels that they use, right? And now after day 2, we can see that no gas was burned from any of them. Whereas between day 2 and day 4, the gas released will burn. Now, so suggest why the gas collected in the balloon and released after day 2 did not burn. Now, you've got to think what's actually going on here inside the apparatus. Let's have another look. So you've got your food waste, which is either potato or cabbage or whatever it's going to be, right, in water. and then they close the cork. But they haven't said that they carried this out in a vacuum to start off with, which means that we have oxygen present to start off with. Now, if you've got oxygen present, what is going to cause the decomposition of food waste is going to be microorganisms, but they're going to be carrying out aerobic respiration in order to do that, right? Because there is oxygen present. So what I'm going to say is that initially there is oxygen present, and so microorganisms break down food waste via aerobic respiration. Alright, now what's the product of aerobic respiration? Well, you should know that glucose plus oxygen is going to cause the release of carbon dioxide and water. Alright, so the important thing there is that the gas releases carbon dioxide. So CO2 is released as a gas, and carbon dioxide doesn't burn. Does not burn. Alright, you should know that carbon dioxide is not used as a fuel. That is actually the product when you carry out a combustion as well, when you burn fuel. So carbon dioxide itself is not going to burn. And if carbon dioxide is the gas that we've released into the balloon, then obviously it's not going to burn, and that's why at day 2 we are not burning any gas. Alright, now it says suggest why potato peelings produce the most biogas. Well, if they produce the most biogas, then that suggests that they have the most fuel in them, and the fuel inside all these foods is carbohydrates. So I'm going to say that the potato peelings have the highest carbohydrate content. Alright, and that means that there's more fuel to be burned, and so you're going to get the most gas. Alright, so let's have a look at the next part. So in 7b, it says that scientists investigated the production of biogas from different types of animal manure. Right, so you've got cow, pig, hen, horse, and sheep, and we have the results in this table. It says calculate the volume of methane produced from 1 kilogram of cow manure. Alright, so we need to have a look at the table. The first part tells us the volume of biogas produced in meters cubed per kilogram of manure, right? Now, this is the volume of gas produced, but we want the volume of methane produced. Now, the second column tells us the methane in the biogas as a percentage of the total volume. So that means out of the total amount of biogas, 65% in the case of the cow is methane. So if we produce 0.34 meters cubed of biogas, then 65% of this will be our methane. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 0.34 meters cubed of biogas, right? And there are two ways of finding a percentage. I always prefer to use the decimal method, and that is just to straight away multiply it by the percentage as a decimal. And 65% as a decimal is 0.65, all right? And that is going to give us our answer, which is 0.221 meters cubed of biogas. All right. So your answer, you could round it if you wanted to, because these are both to 2 decimal places, and say 0.22. So we're going to say 0.22 meters cubed. If you'd have said 0.221, right, and you hadn't rounded, then that is more than okay as well. All right, now B part 2, it says that one scientist concluded that it would be better to use sheep manure in biogas, in a biogas generator, than to use cow manure. What is the evidence for this conclusion using table 4? All right, so let's have a look. There's only 2 marks for this question. Now, the volume of biogas produced in meters cubed per kilogram for sheep is 0.61, and for cows is 0.34. So the first thing I'm going to say is that sheep manure produces more biogas per kilo, and I'll put some figures in. So 0.61 versus 0.34 meters cubed, not per, sorry, than cow manure. Okay, that's one piece of evidence. Now for the second one, let's have a look at the table. Methane in biogas, methane as a percentage in the biogas is 65% from cow manure and 67% from sheep manure. So we're actually producing more methane as a percentage as well. So sheep manure produces a higher percentage of methane, right? And I'll put the figures in again: 67% versus 65% than cow manure. Alright, now that's more than enough for 2 marks, and that is the end of this question and also the end of this entire paper. Alright, so I hope that you were able to follow that, and I hope that's able to help you. If you do have any questions on anything I did cover, then obviously do feel free to write a comment in the box below, or send me a direct email using the link, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Of course, if that was quick and you didn't understand everything, then please do just rewind, pause the video and go at your own pace, because we did cover a lot of stuff in a short period of time. But aside from that, please do remember to like and subscribe, because it really does help me out. And there are more videos like this coming very soon, so you'll want to see those as well. But I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and thanks for watching.